Over the course of Yu-Gi-Oh's history, many decks have risen and fallen, leaving their impact on the meta and by extension the wider player base in various ways. Over time, most players have come to rank these decks into a tier system, based on their tournament results from their respective formats. One of the original breakdowns the community latched onto came from the old Pojo forums, breaking down the tiers as any deck taking 15 to 65% of top cuts as tier 1, 5 to 15% as tier 2, 1 to 5% as tier 3, and anything below is rogue. However, there is one additional tier above all of these, the extremely rare situation where a deck takes over 65% of top cut representation. This classification, known as Tier 0, has only been given to a select few decks over the course of the game's history, generally representing a format where there is absolutely nothing that can dethrone a deck's performance in the metagame. We're going to take a look back over the 6 decks in the game's history that have reached the coveted Tier 0 position, what factors led them to performing as well as they did, and what it took to finally bring down the Titan. In the first couple of years of the game, Yu-Gi-Oh didn't have defined archetypes in the same vein as we do now. Most decks built were in turn named after the gameplay style they exemplified, which led to decks like Beatdown, Clown Control, and the most popular at the time, Hand Control. With cards in the format like Don Zalug, Spirit Reaper, and most notably Yatagarasu, Hand Control had rapidly become one of the most popular decks of the format, though not nearly oppressive enough to be considered Tier 0, as multiple other decks did have footing in the meta. This was all about to change with the set widely regarded as the largest step forward of any set from this time period, which would bring a new strategy to the forefront of meta play: Chaos. Invasion of Chaos released in the TCG in March of 2004, and with it came the core of a new monster series known as Chaos. This set of monsters had the ability to special summon themselves from hand by banishing a light and dark monster from the graveyard, which up until this point was a summoning condition found on very lackluster monsters. These, however, were anything but. The first of these, Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning, was a 3000 attack body that could either banish a monster in exchange for attacking that turn, or attack again after destroying a monster in battle. Its stat line alone matched that of Blue Eyes White Dragon, which was the most powerful main deck monster at the time, and even it required either 2 tributes or an extremely specific setup to summon. BLS on the other hand required minimal setup, was a free summon, and could usually swing the tide of a game on its own. However, as powerful as BLS was, his counterpart in the set was arguably just as strong, if not more. Chaos Emperor Dragon Envoy of the End had the same stat line and summoning condition as BLS. However, his effect was much more of a blanket nuke. For the cost of 1000 life points, CED nuked both players' boards and hands, burning the opponent for every card hit this way, and essentially boiling the game down into a top deck war. While it might seem like it's highly interruptible, at the time the rule known as priority was in effect, meaning that the player who summoned CED had the option to trigger its effect before a card could respond to a successful summon, like Bottomless Trap Hole or Ring of Destruction. This meant that unless you could stop the summon itself with a card like Solemn Judgment, the game state was bound to get nuked. This could be turned into an instant win as well, simply by controlling either Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest upon resolving CED's effect, as either one could search for Yatagarasu, which could then lock the opponent out of draws for the rest of the game, resulting in essentially an OTK, though not in the technical definition since it would be drawn out over the span of multiple turns following. Chaos Sorcerer, while not nearly as powerful as the previous two, could also be summoned in the same way, having the ability to banish a monster in exchange for its attack that turn, though at the time would not be nearly as used as its Envoy counterparts due to its clearly weaker power level. The final Chaos monster, being Dark Magician of Chaos, did not have a special summon condition like the other 3, requiring to either be tribute summoned or cheated out in some way. However, he made up for it by cycling a use spell on summon, which essentially gave you an additional use of one of the best cards in your deck thanks to the power level of the spells in this era. A common way to use D-Mock's effect was to put him into the graveyard, use a card like Monster Reborn, Premature Burial, or Call of the Haunted to revive him, and then cycle a spell, which could even cycle back the Monster Reborn if it was used to summon him. At the time though, the main focus was placed on the 2 Envoy monsters, especially CED, as hand control at the time already had a majority of their best pieces being dark monsters, meaning that by slotting in a couple more light options, the Chaos monsters were easy to leverage without much in terms of deck building concessions, resulting in the deck Chaos Control taking over the format. Over the next few months, the format would slowly boil down to a select few decks, as practically every other deck in the format could not beat out Chaos consistently. Even though the Chaos core was unsearchable, their power level was undeniable, edging out most options from the format and taking over as tier 0, even with a limited list hitting a good portion of their pieces and new sets releasing. It came to a point where the only real options were to either play Chaos or to play one of the jank FTK decks of the format, as they were the only decks that could semi-reliably end a game faster than Chaos could, such as Magical Scientist FTK, Butterfly Dagger Exodia, and Manticore of Darkness Exodia. At this point, it was clear that something drastic would have to happen to bring the meta back into some semblance of balance, and even limiting key pieces of the Chaos strategy, such as Chaos Emperor Dragon, Yada, Witch, and Sangan, hadn't done enough to slow the deck down for others to compete. That step would be taken in August of 2004, around 5 months after the introduction of the Chaos Core, being the first ever forbidden and limited list in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. With this list, cards that had been staple in the game since their inception were removed from the game entirely, particularly with direct hits to the Chaos Control deck itself. Chaos Emperor Dragon, Sangan, Witch, and Yatagarasu were all banned from play, removing the tier 0 deck from the format in its current iteration. In addition, many of the staple spells and traps up until this point, being Dark Hole, Delinquent Duo, Graceful Charity, Harpy's Feather Duster, Monster Reborn, Raigeki, United We Stand, Imperial Order, and Mirror Force were all banned as well, bringing the early era of the game to a close. Chaos would still linger in the format thanks to DMOC and BLS still being limited and Chaos Sorcerer being completely untouched. However, the ability for the deck to lock the game out with CED was gone, meaning that other decks of the format could slowly crawl back in with a reduced power ceiling. This environment would eventually lead into what is referred to as GOAT format within the following year, which is by far and away the most widely played legacy format, and into the GX era, where the impact of specific releases wouldn't reach the same heights as Invasion of Chaos. That was until early 2008, when the next meta-breaking threat would rear its head and make itself known to the wider player base. Throughout the early to mid-GX era, powerful releases were few and far between. While there were cards that pushed the game forward substantially, such as Cyber Dragon, there were also many duds. In early 2008, the landscape had just been shifted with the introduction of Light and Darkness Dragon, leading to the popularity of Monarch-related strategies, although decks like Perfect Circle, Gadgets, and a weaker form of Gladiator Beasts were all playable at this point. However, a new set was on the horizon, focused on bringing powerful new support to any deck that specialized in the Dark attribute, including one particular piece that would once again change the game forever. Phantom Darkness was released in February of 2008, and with it came a slew of support for Dark attribute strategies, supporting the idea of loading multiple Dark attribute monsters into the graveyard to facilitate the summoning of big boss monsters. Cards like Dark Grepher and Armageddon Knight helped to load monsters into the grave, while cards like Dark Nephthys and the Dark Creator were able to leverage them for free special summoning advantage. While many of these cards would become staples of competitive play for a time after, none would be quite as omnipresent as Dark Arm Dragon, a 2800 attack monster that can special summon itself if you have exactly 3 Darks in grave, then let you banish a Dark in grave to destroy a card on field, notably not once per turn. Dark Arm Dragon, or DAD as it became known in the community, would instantly take hold as the new build-around boss monster, rocketing up to the top of the format almost instantly, only further boosted by cards like Dark Grepher, Armageddon Knight, and Allure of Darkness from the same set, Destiny Draw, Destiny Hero Malicious, and Elemental Hero Stratos from previous releases, and the Dark Emperor structure deck released soon after, which gave access to cards like Caius the Shadow Monarch and DDR. The deck would rapidly gain notoriety not only as the best deck in the format, outspeeding all of the mainstays that came before it, but also as easily the most expensive, as shortly after DAD's release, the original Gold Series would be released, and in it, the Shonen Jump Championship prize card Crush Card Virus would be reprinted for community play, but was extremely short printed, causing the staple trap of DAD to be far more expensive than it would have been otherwise. Dark Arm Dragon decks would be tier 0 for a short period of time here, but would quickly come back into balance with the release of Light of Destruction a few months later, bringing Lightsworn to the game, as well as a boost to Gladiator Beasts in the form of Gazaris, putting 2 more decks into the meta to compete with Dark Arm Dragon. However, this was not the Tier 0 meta most people refer to when they're talking about DAD's dominance, as that would come a few months after Light of Destruction's release with the dawn of a new era in the game. The Duelist Genesis was released in September of 2008, and with it came multiple shakeups to the status quo of Yugioh, the most prominent of which being the introduction of Synchro Monsters. Monsters who could be special summoned from the extra deck by sending a combination of tuners and non-tuners listed on the card from the field to the graveyard, whose total level equals theirs. From this introduction, cards like Stardust Dragon and Yugioh Guardian would become regular faces in extra decks. The other major infrastructure change was the introduction of a brand new type to the game in Psychics. This type acted almost like an archetype, being centered around a series of monsters that all had powerful effects at the cost of life points, such as Krebons, who could negate attacks directed at it for 800 life points, and Psychic Commander, who could pay up to 500 life points when the Psychic battles to drop the opponent's attack and defense by that much. However, the piece that would push Psychics over the edge was undoubtedly Emergency Teleport, a quick play spell that could special summon a level 3 or lower Psychic from deck, but banish it if it was still on the field at the end of the turn. This gave players the ability to summon out the aforementioned Krebons and Psychic Commander, which were both tuners, to access synchro summons or to be tributed for something like a Monarch summon. However, the card had another unforeseen consequence to it. Krebons was Dark Attribute. With the new Psychic core, Tele-DAD was born, short for Teleport Dark Arm Dragon. The added emergency teleport could be leveraged with the other level 4 and 6 pieces of the deck to quickly synchro summon monsters like Yugioh and Stardust, while also controlling how many darks were in the grave at any given point to drop Dark Arm Dragon on a moment's notice. This gave the deck far more explosivity than before, immediately eclipsing everything else in the format and forcing the game into an elongated Tier 0 format in which Tele-DAD or Tele-DAD variants were almost the only thing topping, winning every SJC from the release of Emergency Teleport until April of 2009. In this time frame, more and more releases only strengthened the power of Tele-DAD, with cards like Plague Spreader Zombie for more tuners and graveyard manipulation, Black Rose Dragon for an easy access board nuke, and Gores for attack blocking. With essentially everything new only bolstering the strategy further, something had to be done to bring Tele-DAD back under control. The March 2009 ban list would be the action needed to quell the Tier 0 menace, limiting DAD, Emergency Teleport, Plague Spreader Zombie, Rhoda, Card of Safe Return, Chaos Sorcerer, and Mizuki, all of which were tied to a Tele-DAD variant in some way, shape, or form, in addition to the semi-limiting of Destiny Hero Malicious, Summoner Monk, Goblin Zombie, Allure of Darkness, Destiny Draw, and Gold Sarcophagus for similar reasons. After this, Tele-DAD would still be in the format as the deck was still competent, taking the next SJC in Anaheim in April of 2009 with Jeff Jones as the pilot, but its days of Tier 0 had come to an end, as other decks would see a rise to prominence in this era, such as Blackwings, who themselves played DAD. While technically not a Tier 0 format, I'd be remiss to not mention the Dragon Ruler format. Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy was released in May of 2013, and with it came the release of Dragon Rulers, a series of dragon monsters that were meant to boost specific attribute strategies, but instead were just used together in their own deck. Dragon Rulers on release were unquestionably the most powerful deck ever created by Konami at the time. Each of the 4 daddy dragons could either special summon themselves by banishing 2 dragons or monsters of their attribute from hand or grave, could be discarded with another monster of their attribute for an effect, or search a dragon of their attribute when banished, with each only being able to use 1 effect per turn. In addition, they all each had a baby version that could be discarded with any other dragon to summon the corresponding daddy dragon from deck, which fueled your plays further. These cards were usually used to either make rank 7s like Dracosac, Big Eye, or make synchro plays using tuners like Glow Up Bolt. In addition to all of that, they also had the card Super Rejuvenation, which let you draw a card at the end of the turn for every dragon you discarded or tributed that turn, which was generally a ton thanks to the effects of the babies. While in any other format this deck would have easily become Tier 0, the only reason it didn't was because of Spellbooks, who received Spellbook of Judgment in the same set as the Dragon Rulers. Judgment was an extremely powerful card that let Spellbooks essentially go +4 for doing what they would do normally, in addition to summoning a copy of either Kaiku or Jowgen the Spiritualist, who then locked either banishing from grave or special summoning while on the field. This combination was enough to prevent a full Tier 0 takeover from Dragon Rulers, resulting in a dual Tier 1 format. Both decks would be heavily crippled on the September 2013 ban list, which banned all of the babies in addition to Spellbook of Judgment, alongside a slew of other cards that were being used to enable Dragon Rulers getting hit, such as Card Destruction, Super Rejuvenation, and Gold Sarcophagus. After this, Dragon Rulers would be the sole Tier 1 deck of the format, but would never reach Tier 0 due to the competition of the time. The next true Tier 0 format wouldn't be seen until 2015, when an old summoning mechanic would see new life breathed into it. With the start of the Arc 5 era came innovation in almost every summoning mechanic up until that point. Fusions received Shaddolls, which revived the fusing from the deck concept, Exceeds received Tellarknights, which made 3 material rank 4s with ease, and even Tribute Summoning received Clifford, which leveraged the new Pendulum mechanic for their tributes. The other mechanic at this point in dire need of a shakeup was Ritual, as it was essentially stuck in the past with the only innovation in recent years being Gishki. The big step forward coming though was going to do far more than just innovate the mechanic, it was going to break the format. The Secret Forces was released in February of 2015, and with it came the archetype of Nekroz, a series of ritual monsters that each had effects to generate resources or protections from the hand by discarding themselves, and had powerful on-field effects. The primary playmakers of the archetype included Bryonic, who could be discarded to search for any Nekroz ritual monster, Clausulus, who could be discarded to search for any Nekroz spell or trap, Yugioh, who could be discarded to recur any Nekroz card in grave, and Trishula, who banished a card from the opponent's hand, field, and grave on summon. While their insane resource loop was unquestionably powerful, there was one other major reason for their success, being Jin, Releaser of Rituals. At the time, Releaser had been in the format for quite some time, but never really taken advantage of due to the lack of good ritual options. This all changed with Nekroz, as the deck was able to consistently get out Laval Vol Chain using Yugioh as material to dump the Releaser from deck, then use her to make a Nekroz ritual like Clausulus or Trishula, providing a one-sided special summon lock on the opponent known in the community as the Jin lock. The ability to essentially lock your opponent out of the game was undeniably powerful, as a Tier 0 meta would form around Nekroz, seeing the deck take 22 of the 32 top spots at YCS Tacoma in 2015, and 24 of the 32 top spots at YCS Prague a month later. This lock became so prominent that many top players began to gentlemen's out of Jin in the sideboard, meaning to play in an honor system where you would not play Jin in your deck for games 2 and 3. Obviously, this was not enforceable in any way, shape, or form, but the fact that players were legitimately considering it meant something really needed to be done about Jin. The April 2015 ban list would take a passing blow at Nekroz by limiting Preparation of Rites and semi-limiting Nekroz of Bryonic, which would knock Nekroz out of Tier 0 by removing 3 of their best searchers, but would far from remove the deck from the meta. Nekroz would continue to be Tier 1 as it took the main portion of top spots from YCS Chicago, Bogota, Bochum, and Columbus 2015, before finally getting another hit on the ban list with the banning of Laval Vol Chain and Releaser, and the limiting of Shuret and Trishula in July of 2015. This deck's tear through the meta should be seen as a precursor of metas to come, as it would be only the first Tier 0 meta of the Arc 5 era, and the next one was about to swing into action. Thank you all for watching to the end of the video. I understand that I don't normally do part 2s for these kind of analysis, but this particular script was over double the length of my usual scripts, so I had to split it up somewhere. Come back next time and we'll talk about the other 3 Tier 0 decks at a time. Hopefully it won't be too long. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like below and subscribe for more like it. I will be doing a part 2 in the near future. If you want more info on the behind the scenes for these, be sure to follow me on Twitter or check out my Twitch streams when they happen. Both links are in the description below. Thank you all again, and I'll see you next time.